let's turn our attention to Vincent van Gogh and one of his masterpieces, Wheat Field with Cypresses. My presentation will be followed by Rabbi Menachem Creditor, who will delve into the connection between artistic expression and Jewish interpretation. Vincent van Gogh, he was born in March 30th, 1853, and he was born in the Netherlands and died on July 29th, 1890 in France, in the south of France. And this is a landscape from the summer of 1889 in June, about a month after Van Gogh admitted himself to a sanatorium in the town of Saint-Rémy in the south of France. So it's the summer. Van Gogh uses stylized elements of nature to describe a wheat field, olive trees, and cypresses. Recent research shows that Van Gogh painted the landscape in sort of a back and forth manner, beginning with the sky at the top and moving to the front of the painting until everything converges to the center. Beginning at the top with the blue sky almost completely covered with green and white clouds, he uses broad brushstrokes. And coming to the front of the composition, he paints a horizontal wedge where he depicts the golden wheat, fully ripened and bathed in the sun. Both the white and green clouds and the sky and the ripe golden wheat in the front are meant to demonstrate a strong wind. The wheat sways to the right side, and the clouds seem to move, giving us an impression of the rhythm of the wind. In the middle foreground, there are a clump of olive trees on the left side and cypresses on the right side. The poppies in the foreground were added in the wheat stalks, probably as an afterthought. The mountains are painted in purple in order to give the effect of the shadow of the clouds reflected on them. The exaggerated amount of paint that he puts on the brush and does not remove is called impasto. And Van Gogh used a great deal of impasto. We can clearly see the impasto in the clouds, in the sky, in the distance, in the middle ground for the cypresses, and for the olive tree leaves, and close to us, the viewers, hatching to the wheat stalks and calligraphic loops for the grass in the foreground, similar to the clouds. So it's right here, and you cannot see in the slide. The wheat field is painted in a rich golden color, giving us the impression that near us, in the foreground, the wheat is completely sun-bathed. The wheat germinates, grows, and is cut, so it symbolizes the cycle of life. The clouds up in the sky and not near, they are in the distance by the mountains. Some are white, but some are painted in green, a darker tone, signifying that the weather is changing for the worse. And the shadow of the clouds reflected on the mountaintops is the reason the mountains are painted purple, in order to represent the bad weather approaching. The last 2 years of Vincent van Gogh's life, from 1888 to 1890, he is fixated upon cypresses. Cypresses are robust, long-living evergreens present in cemeteries and graveyards, and so they are associated with the macabre and represent death, rebirth, and immortality. Van Gogh planned to use the theme of cypresses on a series of 5 to 6 canvases as a decoration for a room, and possibly as a representation in composition in opposition to the sunflower, which is the symbol of life, consolation, and gratitude. Cypresses and sunflowers are opposites and therefore complementary motifs. Unfortunately, he never finished the scenes. In the many letters that Van Gogh wrote to his brother Theo, he mentions cypresses multiple times. In one such letter, he writes that the cypress is a dark patch in a sun-drenched landscape, but it's one of the most interesting dark notes, the most difficult to hit off exactly that I can imagine. And it is just that. The cypress serves literally and figuratively as this dark spot. In another letter to Theo, he says that the cypress is a splash of black against the blue sky, but not saying directly that he was using the cypress as a death symbol. And in yet another of his letters to his brother Theo, Van Gogh compares the cypress to an Egyptian obelisk. So can you send the first figure of the obelisk? So this is a picture that I took in Egypt. I was there on October 7th, and this was done before that. And this is in the region of Aswan in the south of Egypt. It's the temple called Abu Simbel. And you can see the temple, and in front of the temple, there is a huge obelisk. This is called an obelisk. And it's monumental, reaching to the sky. Can you show the next slide, please? So here is a detail of the obelisk, and you can see that all sides are embellished with writing. This is Egyptian hieroglyphs. So there something is written in them. Can you show the next one, please? So this is an obelisk that we own. It's in Central Park, right behind the Metropolitan Museum. And it's been there since 1881, which was a year after the Metropolitan Museum had moved into this location. And can you show us the next slide, please? So here is another picture that we took during this trip to Aswan. And we are in a quarry. It's a granite quarry, and this is where they manufacture the obelisks. And the obelisk is lying down, but it was completely abandoned. The Egyptians, they would slowly carve the granite until they released this obelisk. But the obelisk had to be one piece of granite. And this one, unfortunately, had something that was a mistake, and so it was abandoned. And apparently was supposed to be placed in front of the temple for Hatshepsut, who was a woman pharaoh. Usually men are pharaoh, but she was a woman. So that's one of the reasons I like it. So what is an obelisk? It's a tapered monolithic pillar originally erected in pairs at the entrance of ancient Egyptian temples. The Egyptian obelisk was carved from a singular piece of stone, usually red granite, from the quarries in Aswan. It was designed to be wider at its base than at the top, and the base could be square or rectangular. The top was usually covered by an alloy of gold and silver, and all four sides are embellished with hieroglyphs that usually include religious dedications to the sun god and commemorations of the rulers. After the obelisk was cut from the quarry, it was transported down the Nile River by barge. And at the temple, workmen would put the obelisk in place by hauling up a ramp made of earth and tilting it, setting it on a base. They generally appeared as pairs flanking a tomb entrance, so they were used as a marker. The name obelisk is Greek for spit, like a long pointed piece of wood generally used for cooking. It was given by Herodotus, the Greek historian who was the first to write about them. And beginning in the Old Kingdom, about 3000 BCE, Egyptian kings and elite individuals set up obelisks of only 3 feet high, maybe of limestone or sandstone. And if inscribed, the obelisk would display only the name and title of the owner. And only a few Old Kingdom examples survive. They may also have had a protective function or served as symbols of fertility and eternal life. With time, obelisks reached heights of over 100 feet. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom, which is in 1500 BCE, more or less, believed that they would live on through these monuments as offerings would continue to be brought to them after the death. The obelisk also represented the living deity Ra, the sun god, and at the same time, it represented the vitality and immortality of the pharaoh and the concept of duality and balance. No matter who or what they commemorated, they were raised and carefully positioned so that the first and last light of day would touch their peaks to honor the sun god. So in a practical sense, the obelisk served as a sundial. Now, coming back to our painting, can you show us the painting again? Thank you. Coming back to the painting, we can see that Van Gogh shows the cypress very tall and reaching to the sky. So in conclusion, Van Gogh leaves the house and comes into a sunny day. He sees a wheat field ripe and golden. It is a breezy and sunny day. The sun bathes the golden wheat field, and at the same time, the wheat sways with the wind. The wheat can be understood as a metaphor for the cycle of life. And further away, the wind brings many clouds, and the sun disappears from behind the clouds. The weather is changing, which you can see by the shadow of the clouds reflected on the mountains. There's a lot of movement of clouds and wheat swaying with the wind, but in the center of the field, there is a cypress tree. It does not move despite the wind. The cypress is erect and dark. This cypress is also a metaphor for eternal life. So there is life in the front, but in the horizon, there is a looming death. Artists use symbols and metaphors to convey ideas, and we can use art as a response or interpretation to difficult ideas. Now, in Judaism, rabbis also need to deal with difficult ideas and difficult texts that they have to explain to the people. For that, we're so lucky to have Rabbi Menachem, Creditor, the Pearl and Iris Scholar in Residence at UJA-Federation. Rabbi Creditor, who will discuss the Jewish significance of acknowledging life's critical moments so we can gain a deeper appreciation for the interplay between artistic creativity, ancient wisdom, and the intricacies of shared human experiences. It is my pleasure to welcome Rabbi Creditor.
Hi, everyone. Really glad to be with you today. I hope we'll leave this slide on even as the lights are on, because it not only is magnificent, it is a text. That's actually where I want to begin. So since whenever I learn text, I like to say a blessing. Even if you're unfamiliar with it, I invite you to say Amen when I'm done, because to be involved with Torah, which is what a Jewish community centers on, is to see not only Torah in the Hebrew text of the Bible, but Torah in wisdom when it is shared, including what Rachel just shared. So I hope that you'll join with me either in the Amen at the end of the blessing, or maybe even in the whole thing. It ends with the words La'asok b'divrei Torah. Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So here's what I am and here's what I'm not. I'm not an expert at art, but I appreciate so much the creation of meaning and what it means to see yourself as an extension of an idea and even your responses as potentially the germ of art. That is a very Jewish way of approaching things. So as Rachel was speaking, I was taking notes, and this is my chance to grow. But what I want to focus on is one specific aspect of Van Gogh's work here, but I then want to depart from the text. In front of you, you have a sheet of paper. It's two-sided. I'd ask you to look at the one that has multiple verses on it, and you'll see that I chose the motif of the cypress. In Hebrew, that's barosh. That's the Hebrew word for it. My goal is not to provide every place in the Hebrew Bible and rabbinic literature where the cypress is mentioned, but to look at it as a way of looking at art, meaning let's reapproach Van Gogh for a moment through the textual reference of the word cypress. Let's see if anything comes from that. I'm just going to read down slowly and give a little bit of context along the way. The verse from Genesis, you might recognize, make yourself an ark, right? So we know who we're talking about, of cypress wood. Make the ark with separate rooms for different animals and cover it inside as well as outside with pitch. You might wonder, why is Noah's Ark meant to be made from cypress wood? And actually, was there such a thing as Noah's Ark? But if you assume that the text is pointing to something that is meaningful, even if it isn't pointing to something that is historical, you ask a slightly different question. Why cypress? Not was there an ark, but why would this story include that element? Is it important? Hold on to the question. I promise you I'm not going to answer it. Just enjoy the question. Second text. Meanwhile, this is from 2 Samuel, from Shmuel. David and the house of Israel danced before God to the sound of all kinds of cypress wood instruments, with lyres, harps, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. This is at the moment where the ark is brought into Jerusalem for the first time. Cypress again. Why? Why is that? And Rachel actually teaches about this, shares with people about the construction of instruments of many kinds, why cypress is used as a harder wood. But again, why cypress? If you would connect these two, which is purely an act of Midrash, purely an act of meaning making, what saved us in the deluge from the flood is part of how we acknowledge being saved in Jerusalem. That meaning is not inherent in the text, but this is what artists do. We work with what we have, with what we've inherited, as an attempt to express something. Continue with me. The cedar and cypress that Hiram kept Solomon provided with for the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, right? Solomon taking forward the journey that David initiated. Isaiah continuing referencing the cypress. Instead of a briar, a cypress shall rise. In this case, a cypress is something that is the opposite of a death trajectory, something strong. One second. If you continue along the text, the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, includes cypress as the beams of a house, and this is the erotic dream of a lover. That the beams of the house will be strong, and the cypress, which maybe in comparison is a little bit more flexible, I don't know, but it's love language. We're shifting in the way these raw materials are acknowledged, and part of what I wanted to point to through the use of these verses is that the Bible itself is concerned with the natural world. The Bible loves the created world. It's not meant to be left behind. It's not meant to be a side point. In fact, creation itself is told twice in the book of Genesis. The first story begins as Van Gogh did, with the sky, with the dividing of things so that there would be space between things. And one after another, natural elements are introduced into the world. Only in the second telling of the story of Genesis do people come first. The Torah is just as concerned with the world as an artist might be. And you might know this from the High Holidays. Anyone know the melody? Ki hine kachomer biyad hayotzer. Behold, We are like raw materials in the hand of the artist, capital A. Source of art, the source of text, the source of meaning, even if we have radically different theologies and even no theology, something beyond the self calls, and that's what art always, I think good art, always is, something called. I might not never know what it is. Isn't it fascinating to wonder what it might be? So if you look at these different elements, I don't really know what a cypress is. I wonder if Van Gogh really cared what a cypress was, except that one of the quotes that was so meaningful to me when I did a little bit of research, he said, the cypresses still preoccupy me because it astonishes me that no one has yet done them, no one has yet seen them as I see them. He had a relationship with this. He was in a deeply vulnerable moment in his life. And a series of 4 of these images, which can be found both at the Met and in London in a private collection and in Amsterdam, they're radically different. This one, if the research that I found can be trusted, was constructed outside, when he was still able to be outside of on the grounds themselves, closer to the nature. But the other versions of this piece of art, one is pen and pencil, one is more impressionistic and therefore smoother, less impasto, and the other one is smaller, which perhaps has a lot in common with this. But isn't it beautiful to see the cracks in the paint? To see the layering of meaning, to start far away and to come close, and to build meaning in a way that he thought he uniquely could see. Why create something? Perhaps because you see something. And for all of the meaning that Jewish tradition believes can be found in text, you might know this. There are 2 classic hermeneutic moves, meaning-making moves. One is called eisegesis, and one is called exegesis. The difference is traditionally understood as such. Exegesis is what the text says. Eisegesis is when we add meaning to it. Before I make a joke about that, what does this mean? We can analyze it. History of an obelisk, wow. We can explore Van Gogh's life, his context. We can talk about the artistic materials, the quality of the colors, each element in nature, how it appears in different artists' depictions. But I'm really asking a very basic question. What does that mean? Exegesis. I can do eisegesis. Beauty. It's the abundance of the wheat and the mortality of the cypress. It is the layering of our world. It is motion, even in stasis. It is so many things. But is that what it means? So Dr. Bert Visotsky, some of you might know, he was a teacher of mine of Midrash, of interpretation at the Jewish Theological Seminary. He said, you know the real difference between exegesis and eisegesis? Remember, traditionally understood, exegesis is what the text says and eisegesis is layers of meaning. He said, actually, that's not what it is. Exegesis is what I say the text means, and eisegesis is what you say the text means. The only way potentially to know what this means is to ask Van Gogh, what was the experience of creating this art for you, and why does he owe us an answer anyway? That's not what this is about. Or maybe he was ill and in search of healing. And maybe by being a creator, he could tap into his own strength. Maybe by revealing his process through this artistic technique, this piece of art is less about cypress and wheat and olive trees and sky, and perhaps more about I, Vincent van Gogh, was here. I see a very interesting fictionalized depiction of Van Gogh. It's my favorite scene in Doctor Who. If anyone's a fan of Doctor Who, the series, it's a cult classic in Great Britain and now on Disney+, but you'll have to go to YouTube for this one. There's a scene where Doctor Who can travel through time and space, meets Van Gogh and brings Van Gogh to a Van Gogh exhibit. And as some believe, we don't know these things certain. Van Gogh is a very emotional person. So the actor that plays him does such a tender job. It's beautiful. And so Dr. Hu turns Van Gogh's back to the curator and then asks the curator, listen, let me ask you a question. Where would you place Van Gogh in the world of art? And the curator, rhapsodic, it's beautiful. Not only was that wild man in the south of France one of the world's greatest, most popular painters, but he was also one of the greatest people to ever live. Now, do I know such a thing? Maybe it's true, but the actor that plays Van Gogh does Midrash on Van Gogh. Who wouldn't? To be able to have created something that lasted beyond one lifetime, be worthy of attention, to be wondered about as we do, what does it mean? How will we ever know, except that let's assert that it means something? It certainly meant something to him. The beautiful depiction, one of my favorite books, Dara Horn is an author that some of you might have read, has some phenomenally important things to say in this world, including her most recent book, which is called Everyone Loves Dead Jews. A happy book, but a very important one these days. In my favorite book of hers, which is called The World to Come, she describes a Ukrainian boarding school where orphaned children, orphaned boys, went to learn. And in this fictionalized school, which actually there were many of, there were artists and literary giants who were there because you can't make a living necessarily as an artist. But among the instructors there were Marc Chagall and a Yiddish poet known as Der Nister, the hidden one. And they're competing for the attention of a young student, a gifted young man. Der Nister is walking him around the grounds and saying, this is what this means, and my poetry, and I'm so great, and aren't you impressed by me? And then brings the young boy into Chagall's studio. There they see canvases of many kinds, a blue unfinished one over here, some of the famous ones that'll be used in Moscow in the theater later. And Der Nister looks at Marc Chagall, trying to get the boy's attention, saying, Comrade Chagall, tell me, what does this one mean? Dara Horn's story. Chagall leans in and says, it means blue. Exegesis. Eisegesis. There are different levels of Midrash. Do I know anything about why the cypress is used to create the ark? Do I know anything really about anything? We assert, sometimes assume, that the text means something. Beautiful thing about Judaism is the prism that it brings is not only focused on inherited text, but on the possibility of your face being the text that matters most. Manuel Levinas, who I mentioned recently, the one French Jewish philosopher who said that the most important thing you can do and the hardest act a person can do is to look someone else in the face. Why? I don't have to actually put you on the spot to ask you, except one at a time. I'm sort of looking you in the eyes, and some of you are looking away. Much. In a world where Zoom became commonplace, it also became strangely familiar to look right at someone else in the eyes. And when cameras are off, sometimes that's a discomfort. What are we looking at here? What is art? Through Jewish eyes, an artist, the most sublime artist next to God, perhaps, Bezalel. Might know the name, especially because the Bezalel School of Art in Israel is housed at UJA's Jerusalem campus for the arts. It is an exquisite place where the most gifted artists in Israel and from around the world come together to do this thing called Midrash, but to do it with their hands. We do it with our bodies when we dance. We do it with our voices when we sing. I don't really know what I'm looking at. I really love it. I imagine things, art of some kinds, that either I understand or don't make me feel things. I don't quite know what's happening, but I wonder, can I see a stalk of wheat or a tree? Well, I see it differently because I saw this. If not, why not? Is the distance between the artist and the created piece meant to distance the viewer from the object of the art? Does this protect me from trees? Or is it meant to invite me into the raw experience of nature? So I'm not really closing because there's no way to close a conversation about meaning. But on the other side of your sheets, and I really do mean this, leave the verses behind. That's not the point of this. Verses are nice. Torah is awesome. But meaning is much bigger than a text on a page. Even divine meaning can't possibly be captured. On the other side of the page is it's actually a famous Israeli song based on a Hasidic master. Some of you might know the name Naomi Shemer, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of Gold, and many, many, many other important songs. She took words from the Hasidic master of Nachman of Bratslav, who, by the way, was also known as a very emotional person. We believe, though we can't know, that he was manic depressive. He actually spent a significant amount of time in hermitude, just in his own quarters. And his books are all about not giving in to despair. Beautiful to think about a conversation that Rav Nachman of Bratslav and Vincent van Gogh might have had about what it is to see the light. So these are Naomi Shemer's adapted lyrics to the poem by Rav Nachman of Bratslav called Shirat Asavim, Song of the Grass. So I'm just going to read the English, and then because we're talking about art, I'd like to sing the Hebrew. It means something else when we sing. Sure, I don't have to say it to anyone here, but we also know scientifically that the cognitive process is different when it's musical. Memories are different when it's a song. Maybe it's not really the words, but here are the words. Know that each and every shepherd has his or her own unique tune. Know that each and every blade of grass, perhaps, or of wheat, has its own unique song. And from the songs of the grass, the tune of the shepherd is created. How beautiful and fine when we hear their song. It is very good to pray between them and to labor for God with awe. And the song of the grass causes the heart to awaken and to long. When from the song the heart awakens and longs toward the land of Israel, a great light is drawn out and rises because it has the holiness of the land upon it. And from the song of the grass, the tune of the heart is fashioned. Before I sing it, just let those words in for a second. Where does beauty begin? And the grass gives us the song gives us the longing gives us the land. It's a different kind of cycle. It's a beautiful cycle. If you know it, sing it. בכל רואה ורואה, יש לו ניגון מיוחד משלו. דע לך שכל עשב ועשב, יש לו שירה מיוחדת משלו, ומשירת העשבים נעשה ניגון של רועה. כמה יפה ונאה, כששומעים את השירה שלהם. טוב מאוד להתפלל ביניהם, וביראה לעבוד את השם, ומי ומשירת העשבים מתעורר הלב ומשתוקק, וכשהלב מן השירה מתעורר ומשתוקק אל ארץ ישראל. אור גדול אזי נמשך ועולה מקדושתה של הארץ עליו, ומשירת העשבים נעשה ניגון של הלב. Before we end, if I could just ask, maybe we've been doing only part of what we can do when it comes to a piece of art like this. Maybe we've been using our eyes too much. You should listen for the rustling of the wheat. Maybe the kind of art that shows you its process, even in its finished product, is made to get you wondering about life itself. This was months before he died. I don't know if he knew that. Certainly he was thinking about the end of his life. Mortality is such a complicated thing. Art a defiance against the limits of a life. I would bless us to feel the possibilities of making meaning and appreciating it where we find it, especially in the created world that needs real appreciation. You can't find those trees really in a museum. See them when you walk out the door of this building. Decide that means something too.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Creditor, for your insightful presentation and wonderful teaching. Please mark your calendars and register for Israel Matters on June 4th, where we will pay tribute to Rabbi Creditor. Most importantly, thank you all for being a valiant partner in the noble fight. We hope that you have enjoyed the first of our two-part Art Matters series. And please remember to join us on May the 30th at our second Art Matters, when Candice will share her choice of artwork alongside Rabbi Creditor. Thank you all, and to all of those who are on call today, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.